The station had no name anymore. It used to. Once, long ago, it was called Meridian Cross, a proud name for a proud place, carved into the metal above the main gate by human hands during the first wave of galactic expansion. But the aliens had renamed it Veth Nora, which translated loosely to the place where tired things stop. Most travelers did not even bother to learn that name. They just called it the last stop before the outer drift, a cold stretch of dead space where shipping lanes went quiet and signals faded into nothing. It was not a beautiful place. The corridors were narrow and smelled of fuel and something older, something harder to name. The ceilings were low for most alien species, which meant the tall, silver-skinned Orin had to duck every time they passed through a hallway, and they never let anyone forget how much they hated that. The floors were worn smooth by 1,000 different kinds of feet, claws, pads, hooves, boots, and the lighting flickered in the east wing because nobody had bothered to fix it in 3 years. Marin Cole had been fixing other things instead. He ran the only barbershop on Veth Nora, a small room at the end of Corridor 7 with 2 chairs, 1 cracked mirror, and a hand-painted sign above the door that read, "All Species Welcome." He had painted that sign himself on his first day, 8 years ago, using leftover yellow paint from a cargo repair job. Most aliens had laughed at it. A few had walked in out of curiosity and never come back. But some had stayed, and that was enough for Marin. He was not a large man. 39 years old, with steady hands, short dark hair going gray at the temples, and eyes that people often described as too calm for someone living in a place like this. He had come to Veth Nora after the war, not the big galactic war that everyone talked about, but a smaller, quieter one that had taken his brother and left Marin with nothing but a pair of scissors and a skill his grandfather had taught him in a small town in northern Canada. He had followed the shipping lanes outward, stop by stop, until he reached the last stop. He had not planned to stay. That was 8 years ago. On the morning that everything changed, Marin was sweeping the floor when he heard the sound outside his door. It was not a loud sound. In fact, it was the opposite. A low, rattling breath, the kind that came from something very old trying very hard to keep going. He stepped into the corridor and looked down. The dragon was small. That was the first thing that surprised him. Every dragon Marin had ever seen in galactic broadcasts was enormous, scaled creatures the size of cargo haulers, with wingspans that could block out a station's artificial sun. This one could have fit in a large suitcase. It lay on its side against the corridor wall, its dark green scales dull and cracked at the edges, its wings folded tight against its body like it was trying to take up as little space as possible. Its eyes were half open. One front claw was stretched out slightly, as if it had been reaching for something and stopped midway. Around its neck was a collar. Marin had seen collars on working animals before, and on a few alien species who wore them for cultural reasons. But this one was different. It was old, very old, and made of a dark material he did not recognize. Symbols were etched into the surface, small and precise, the kind of careful work that took years to learn. A metal tag hung from the front of the collar, the kind used for identification across 37 registered galactic species. 3 aliens walked past while Marin stood there. The first was an Orin trader, tall and silver, who glanced down and kept walking without breaking stride. The second was a Keth merchant with 4 arms and an expensive coat, who looked, wrinkled what passed for its nose, and moved to the other side of the corridor. The third was a young Prill, a species known for being gentle, who paused, looked at the dragon, looked at Marin, and then quietly walked away. Marin stood still. He looked at the dragon for a long moment. Then he crouched down slowly so as not to frighten it. He reached out and carefully lifted the metal tag from the collar, tilting it toward the flickering light of the east wing. He read it, and his hands went completely still. The tag was cold in Marin's fingers. He turned it slowly, angling it toward the light. The symbols on the front were galactic standard script, the kind used on official documents and registered identity records across the known systems. Marin had learned to read it years ago, during his first month on the shipping lanes, because he had quickly understood that a man who could not read the language of space was a man who would be cheated, ignored, or worse. He read the name first. Soren. Below the name was a species classification. Dragon, subclass Velith. Velith dragons were the oldest subclass, Marin knew that much. He had read about them once in a station archive during a slow afternoon. They were not common. In fact, he was almost certain they had been declared functionally extinct by the Galactic Registry about 40 years ago. A remaining population of fewer than 12, last recorded in the outer drift. Nobody had reported a sighting since. He kept reading. Below the species line was a rank designation. That was unusual. Animals did not have ranks. Working creatures sometimes did, but the rank printed on this collar was not the kind given to a cargo beast or a station guard animal. It was a military designation. Old format, pre-unification war style, the kind that had not been used in active records for over 3 decades. Commander. Velith First Wing. Galactic Coalition Forces. Marin read it twice. Then he read the line below it, and that was when his hands stopped moving entirely. The line said, decorated. 17 campaigns. Last survivor. He stayed crouched on the floor for a long moment, not speaking, not moving. The corridor hummed around him. Distant engines, the clatter of a cargo loader somewhere in the East Bay, the low murmur of alien voices passing through adjoining halls. Normal sounds. Station sounds. The sounds of a place that did not know or care what was lying against its wall. Marin looked at Soren's face. The dragon's eyes had opened slightly more. They were amber-colored, deep and very tired, and they were looking at him with an expression Marin recognized immediately because he had worn it himself once, a long time ago in a field hospital after the war. It was the expression of someone who had stopped expecting anything from anyone and had made a kind of peace with that. It broke something open in Marin's chest. He stood up, went into his shop, and came back with a folded blanket he kept on the shelf behind the second chair. He spread it on the floor beside Soren without speaking, then carefully, very gently, helped the small dragon shift onto it. Soren did not resist. The dragon weighed almost nothing, which told Marin everything he needed to know about how long it had gone without food or water. He went back inside, filled a shallow bowl with water, and set it close to Soren's head. Then he sat on the floor beside the dragon and waited. It took a few minutes, but Soren drank. Marin watched the corridor while the dragon rested. 2 more aliens passed. Neither looked down. A station maintenance bot rolled by, scanned the area, classified Soren as non-obstructing biological presence, and moved on. That was the thing about Veth Nora. If something was not blocking a doorway or causing a commercial disruption, it was invisible. A decorated war veteran, last of his kind, was lying on a corridor floor, and the station had classified him as non-obstructing. Marin felt something he had not felt in years. It was not exactly anger. It was quieter than anger and heavier, the kind of feeling that settled into the bones rather than flaring in the chest. He had felt it first when his brother did not come home, and again when the government sent a form letter instead of an explanation. He looked down at the tag still in his hand. 17 campaigns. He tried to imagine that. 17 separate conflicts, 17 times the small creature had gone to war, had survived when others had not, had come back. And now it was here, alone, on a floor that smelled of engine grease, with nobody stopping to ask if it was alive. Marin closed his fingers around the tag. He made no speech. He said nothing dramatic. He simply stood up, walked to his shop door and turned the sign from closed to open. Then he went to the storage cabinet, found the emergency ration kit he had never used and started preparing something warm. Whatever came next, Soren would not face it on an empty stomach. But Marin did not yet know that by morning, someone very powerful would know exactly where Soren was, and they would want the dragon gone before sunrise. Soren ate slowly. Marin had heated a simple protein mix from the emergency kit, the kind designed for multi-species consumption, bland but filling. He had added a small amount of station-grade mineral supplement because the dragon's scales were too dull, and dull scales on a Velith meant the body was shutting down from the inside. He had read that in the same archive. He had not known at the time why he bothered remembering it. He knew now. Soren finished the bowl and looked up at Marin with those amber eyes. The exhaustion was still there, deep and old, but something else had appeared alongside it. Something cautious. The dragon was watching him the way a creature watched something it did not yet trust but was beginning to consider. Marin nodded once, the way he nodded at customers when a haircut was done. Simple. Respectful. No performance. Soren made a sound then, low, rough, like gravel shifting, and Marin realized after a moment that it was speech. Old Galactic dialect, the formal kind, the kind used in military and government circles 3 decades ago. Marin's understanding of it was limited, but he caught enough. The dragon had said, "You read it." "Yes," Marin said. Another sound. Slower this time. "No one reads it." Marin did not answer that. There was nothing useful to say. Instead he asked the only question that mattered right now. "How long since you ate last?" Soren was quiet for a moment. Then, "Many stops ago." Many stops. On the outer lanes, stops were days apart, sometimes longer. Marin kept his expression steady and made a note to prepare another bowl in an hour. He was heating the second ration when the knock came. It was not a polite knock. It was the kind of knock that expected the door to open immediately and was already annoyed that it had not. Marin set the heating unit to low and opened the door. Two of them. Orin, both tall, both in the gray and black uniforms of Veth Nora Station security. Behind them, partially obscured but unmistakably present, was a third figure, shorter, robed, carrying a data tablet in four thin fingers. A Keth administrator. Senior rank, based on the gold trim on the collar. The administrator did not introduce itself. It held up the tablet, and on the screen was an image of Soren, clearly taken by the maintenance bot that had scanned the corridor an hour ago. The creature in your establishment, the administrator said in crisp galactic standard, is an unregistered biological presence on this station. It must be removed to the holding bay for processing and disposition. Marin looked at the tablet. Then at the administrator. His name is Soren. Pause. The administrator's expression did not change. The creature has no active registration on current galactic records. He has a collar, Marin said. Coalition issue. Pre-unification format. The administrator's four fingers tightened slightly on the tablet. That was small, but Marin caught it. Pre-unification records are archived and inactive. They carry no current legal standing. The name on that collar, Marin said, keeping his voice completely even, is Soren of the Velith First Wing. 17 campaigns. Decorated by the Coalition High Command. He paused. I looked up the campaign records in the station archive tonight. His name appears in the official victory citations for the breach of Solta Prime. Without the Velith First Wing, the Solta offensive fails. Without Solta, the unification treaty has no foundation. He paused again. Which means the legal system you're using to remove him right now doesn't exist without him. The corridor was very quiet. One of the Orange security officers shifted weight, almost too small to notice. The administrator's eyes moved to the back of the shop, where Soren lay on the blanket, watching. The dragon had not moved. But those amber eyes were open fully now, and there was something in them that had not been there before. Not hope exactly. Something older than hope. Recognition maybe. The look of someone hearing their own name spoken properly for the first time in a very long time. The administrator looked back at Marin. Its voice was quieter now, and that was more dangerous than the loud version. You are a barber. You cut hair. I would encourage you to remember what you are and what you are not. Marin held the door and did not step aside. I remember exactly what I am, he said. The question is whether you remember what he is. The administrator said nothing. But as it turned to leave, it spoke one quiet word into the communication device on its wrist. Marin did not catch the word. But Soren did. And the dragon's eyes went very still. Soren spoke one word after the administrator left. Run. Marin was already locking the shop door. No. The dragon's voice was low and rough, but clearer now than it had been an hour ago. The food and water had done something. Not enough, but something. You do not understand what word was spoken. Tell me, Marin said, moving to the small wall terminal beside the mirror and pulling up the station archive access he had used earlier that night. Veth Decree, Soren said. It is an old administrative order. Allow station command to classify a biological presence as a hazard and remove it without appeal. No hearing. No record. The dragon paused. It was created after the Unification War. To handle things that were inconvenient. Marin kept his eyes on the terminal. Things like decorated veterans who might embarrass someone. Soren did not answer. The silence was answer enough. Marin pulled up the Veth Decree in the archive. It was there, buried under 17 layers of administrative code, the kind of document designed to exist without being found. He read it quickly. Soren was right. Once invoked, the decree gave station command complete authority. No appeal process. No outside contact required. They could move within the hour and there was nothing in station law to stop them. Nothing in station law. Marin stood very still for a moment, thinking the way his grandfather had taught him to think when a situation looked impossible. His grandfather had been a man who fixed things with whatever was in the room. He had told Marin once that the answer was always present, always close, always in something you had already seen but not looked at properly. Marin looked at the terminal. Then at Soren's collar. Then at the archive record still open on the screen, the Solta Prime victory citation with Soren's name printed clearly in the official Coalition historical record. He started typing. The Coalition Historical Preservation Act was not a station document. It was a galactic-level statute, passed 31 years ago to protect artifacts, records, and living beings directly cited in official Coalition victory records. It had been created primarily to protect cultural sites and war memorials. Nobody had ever applied it to a living creature before because nobody had needed to. Soren was cited by name in an official coalition victory record. Which meant, if Marin was reading the statute correctly, that Soren was legally classifiable as a living historical subject. And any action taken against a living historical subject without authorization from the Coalition Heritage Authority was a direct violation of galactic law, which sat several levels above station administrative code. The Veth Decree was station law. The Coalition Historical Preservation Act was galactic law. Marin filed the classification request at the Galactic Heritage Portal, flagged it urgent, attached the victory citation, and submitted it before he allowed himself to think about whether it would work. Then he opened the station-wide communication channel, the public one, the one every screen in every corridor displayed, and he did something he had never done in 8 years on Veth Nora. He made an announcement. He kept it short. His voice was calm. He stated his name, his location, and his occupation. He said that a decorated Coalition War veteran, the last surviving member of the Velith First Wing, was currently in Corridor 7, that this veteran had been formally classified under the Coalition Historical Preservation Act, and that any attempt to remove or harm this individual would be a violation of galactic law and would be recorded and transmitted to the Coalition Heritage Authority. He turned off the channel. The shop was very quiet. Soren was watching him from the blanket with an expression Marin could not fully read. The amber eyes were different now, not just tired, not just cautious. Something in them had shifted, the way light shifts when a cloud moves. You filed a legal classification, Soren said slowly. For me? Yes. It may not be accepted. I know. They may come anyway. I know that too. The dragon was quiet for a long moment. Then, why? Marin turned from the terminal and looked at him directly. Because 17 campaigns is not nothing. Because Last Survivor is not nothing. Because you were lying on a floor and every single person walked past you, and I don't know how to do that. Before Soren could respond, the terminal chimed. Marin turned. It was not the Heritage Portal. It was the station command channel, restricted frequency, senior administrator level. The message was 4 words. Stand down or else. From somewhere deeper in the station came the sound of heavy boots. More than 2 this time. Many more. Marin did not stand down. He read the message twice, set the terminal to record everything and turned to face the shop door. The sound of boots was getting closer. Measured, deliberate, the kind of pace that wanted to be heard. It was a tactic. Make enough noise and most people opened the door before anyone had to knock. Marin had learned about tactics from his brother, who had not come home from a war fought by people following orders written by administrators exactly like the ones now walking down Corridor 7. He was done opening doors early. He looked at Soren. The dragon had shifted on the blanket, pulling itself into a sitting position. It was a slow movement and it clearly cost something, but Soren held it. Back straight. Head up. The posture of a soldier, even in a body that had nearly given out. You should know, Marin said quietly, that I have been transmitting everything since the announcement. Every word. Every record. The filing, the decree, the message they just sent me. It is all going out on the open galactic relay. Soren's amber eyes held steady. To whom? Anyone listening on the heritage frequency, Marin said. Which, according to the archive, includes 17 active coalition member stations and 4 independent oversight bodies. The boot stopped outside the door. The knock came. Art. Official. Marin opened it. There were 6 of them this time. 4 Orange security officers and 2 humans in station command uniforms. That detail registered quietly, and it stung in a way Marin filed away for later. Behind them, the Keth administrator, its expression carved from cold stone. This is your final opportunity, the administrator said, to step aside and allow lawful station procedure to proceed. I have filed a coalition historical preservation classification for the individual in this room, Marin said. That filing is active and transmitting. Any action you take right now is being recorded and broadcast on the open heritage relay to 17 stations and 4 oversight bodies. One of the human officers shifted. Not much, but enough. The administrator's voice dropped. A filing is not an approval. Until approved, it carries no binding authority. Correct, Marin said. But the act of removing a subject during an active pending classification is itself a violation. The action, not the outcome, triggers the statute. He had found that clause at the very bottom of the act, in language so dry it was clearly designed never to be read by anyone. So if you come through this door, you are in violation the moment you step over the threshold. Approved or not. The corridor was absolutely still. The administrator stared at him. Marin stared back. He was aware that he was one man with a pair of scissors in his back pocket and no other weapons, facing 6 armed officers and a senior administrator with the full authority of station command behind every word. He was also aware that his hands were not shaking, which surprised him slightly. Then the terminal chimed. Everyone heard it. Marin stepped back, keeping his eyes on the doorway, and glanced at the screen. Classification request. Reference Soren Velith First Wing. Status. Approved. Subject designated living historical record under Coalition Act 7 preservation. Any interference with subject constitutes violation of Galactic statute. Coalition Heritage Authority notified. Oversight response dispatched. Estimated arrival, 4 hours. Marin turned the screen so the administrator could read it. He said nothing. There was nothing to say. The administrator read it once. Then looked at Soren. Then looked at Marin with an expression that had no warmth in it and never would. It turned without a word and walked away. The officers followed. The sound of boots faded down the corridor and did not come back. Marin closed the door. He stood with his back against it for a moment, breathing slowly, letting the silence settle. Then he walked to the second chair in the shop, the good one, the one with the repaired armrest, and he carefully helped Soren into it. The dragon was light, almost weightlessly so, but it moved with a dignity that made the weight irrelevant. Marin picked up his comb and his best scissors. You do not have to, Soren said. I know, Marin said. He began to work. Carefully, slowly, the way his grandfather had taught him, with full attention, full respect, as if the person in the chair was the most important person in the room because they always were. The dull, cracked edges of Soren's scales caught the light differently as Marin worked around them, cleaning away the damage of years of neglect with the same steady hands he used for everything. Nobody had done this for Soren in a very long time. When it was done, Marin set down the scissors and looked at the dragon in the cracked mirror. Soren looked back. The amber eyes were full in a way they had not been at the beginning of the night, not with tears exactly, but with something that lived in the same place tears came from. 17 campaigns, Marin said quietly. You deserved better than a corridor floor. Soren was silent for a long moment. Then the old dragon said, in a voice that was steadier than it had any right to be, You are the first in 31 years to say so. Marin nodded once. Then he turned the sign on the door back to open, put the kettle on, and waited for the coalition oversight team to arrive. Outside in the corridor, for the first time in longer than either of them could measure, the station felt slightly less cold.